Most small business owners build themselves jobs. They don't build companies, they build themselves a job. And they start talking about revenue goals. All I start asking them is like, okay, what are your hours goals?
Alrighty, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the True Life Network podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ashabi, and today I got a special treat for you guys. Today's guest is the co-founder of one of the largest online automotive communities known as LS1 Tech with over 300,000 registered members. He's the author of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Side Hustle Millionaire, How to Build a Side Business That Creates Financial Freedom, where he teaches the readers all of the info and the insights that they need to know in order to turn their passion into profit. He has built a passion for teaching entrepreneurs how to start, scale, and sell their businesses, and continue to assist these individuals through his podcast and consulting brand 365 Driven. Ladies and gentlemen, today I bring to you the one and only Mr. Tony Whatley. Tony, I appreciate you joining us.
Hey, Mike, thanks for the opportunity, man. It's good to connect, and I can't wait to get to know some of your listeners, give them some value. And I know that you're going to be on my show as well. So I'm looking forward to that second conversation too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So Tony, the way I actually really start these things, I always want to jump into your personal background, because entrepreneurship, these individuals who are making it to the success that you do have, they do have somewhat of a rough background, and the trials and tribulations that they go through and the adversity that they go through really allows them to strengthen their mindset to ultimately pursue and obtain the results that they're looking for. So I kind of want to jump into your background story real quick and just kind of understand the obstacles that you've had to overcome to get where you're at today.
And I like the question. It's good for setting context. I agree with you. So my background, I grew up, I would say, lower middle class, small houses. Most of the houses I grew up in, 3 in a row, are basically what most people would call a flip house nowadays. So we would move in, my family, my sister, my mom and dad, we would actually restore and refurbish the house as we lived. We basically go buy the crappiest house on the crappiest neighborhood, and we would live in that, and we would just restore it as we went. And eventually it became one of the nicer houses in the neighborhood, because my parents always had really a lot of pride in what we had, even if we didn't have a lot. So I would say that I grew up with everything I needed, but not a lot of the things I wanted. So all the kids had newer bicycles and stuff. We were getting all the used stuff. My mom actually made clothes for us. I'm a son of a Japanese immigrant. My mother's Japanese. I was actually born in Japan on a military base. My dad was in the Vietnam War as a U.S. Marine. And so I grew up with a dichotomy of Baptist and Buddhism. So like strange spiritual differences on polar opposites there. And my mom worked her entire career as a cafeteria worker in the public school system. My dad, when he got out of the military, worked in the refineries and the chemical plants as a laborer and worked his way up through management in those. So I got to see the value of hard work. I got to see that parents were struggling financially. And the thing is, like, I talked to a lot of people that grew up in poverty and government assistance and things like that we had. We didn't realize that we were poor. I think a lot of people that may be watching this relating to that, they're like, when you get to become an adult and you look back on your childhood, you realize, like, man, we just didn't really have much. But I didn't feel that way. I mean, I think you start to sense that maybe when you get into high school. You start to compare yourself, and you see your friends wearing the brand names and things like that you can't afford, and you start to realize it later in your teens. But I didn't know that I was broke looking back, and that taught me the value of hard work. My mom and dad would always say, hey, if you want to figure something out, you got to go figure it out. Nobody's going to give you anything in life. Nobody owes you anything. You're not entitled to anything. And so, I graduated high school. I put myself through college for an engineering degree here at the University of Houston. And it took me 7 years. A lot of people think, like, how come it took you so long? It's because I was working as a welder, a pipe fitter, waiting tables on the weekends. I was taking night school. So it took me 7 years to be able to finish an engineering degree. And that's kind of the backstory, I'd say, leading up to where I got into entrepreneurship.
Okay. So a couple things that you said there that, I want to pick your brain on. So first of all, the portion of being around, your friends who have all the designer brands and, whatnot growing up, and you don't really realize it at the time. I think that portion, personally for me, is a big thing that's helped me try to pursue where, I'm trying to go today. Because, for example, I grew up in Upper Saddle River, New Jersey, which is a pretty wealthy area. Everybody that I was going to high school with, their parents, owned major companies. For example, one of the kids that I went to high school with, his dad owns As Seen on TV. So, these kids are driving like major, luxury cars to school. And, being around that and not having it yourself, I kind of think it opens up your perspective to what's actually possible. And these kids that are just handed it to them, they don't really understand the value behind it or what it really takes to obtain it. But when you're around it and you're not giving it to yourself, it's not given to you, and you actually try to pursue it, I think that it actually brings more gratitude to the individual of the pursuit to obtain, this kind of lifestyle. So I kind of want to understand a little bit more how that, played a part in your journey as well.
Yeah, I think that when I was in grade school and junior high, I thought it was cool that my mom made our clothes, but I didn't realize it's because we couldn't afford nice clothes and it was cheaper to go buy the fabric, and she knew how to sew. She learned that in Japan, that she enjoyed doing that. So she made my sisters and I clothes. But when you start having other kids look at things like the label thing, probably late junior high is when it starts to occur. Mm-hmm. You realize it's just not that cool to wear clothes that your mom made. I would say that looking back, my mom actually made nicer clothes than the ones that you could buy. I mean, she put a lot of attention into detail, and she was a seamstress, a tailor. She actually made really nice stuff, but it's just not cool, right? And I remember going to the shoe store because I played football, ran track, and I would always look at the shoes. And back then, Nikes were the thing, the Jordans and all that were my era. I graduated high school in 1991. So you can realize like 80s and 90s was that heyday of Jordan, Nike.
Oh, yeah.
We couldn't afford them, dude. Like I couldn't afford those shoes. Like that was like what rich kids could afford. And so we always had to get the no-name brands and the things that probably are out of business by now, just because that's what we could afford. So I always valued like certain brands that I couldn't afford. And, talking about cars, I also grew up in a town, suburb of Houston called Friendswood, Texas, where they had a high level of affluent people there. I would say it's more middle class, upper middle class, but there's definitely a lot of wealthy people there. So like your school sounds like, the student parking lot had nicer vehicles than the faculty parking lot. So there was like all these brand new 5.0 Mustangs and IROC Z28s and, all these nice cars in the student lot. Then the teachers drove their crap boxes, right? So I get that. But here's the thing that I want to really emphasize, because we see so many people that understand other people have more. And I get that. I always saw that. As soon as I could ride my bicycle around, I would go visit these nice neighborhoods and just look at the houses and go, man, they got 5 cars in the driveway. I wonder how many people live in that house. And it's probably 2 people, right? We have extra vehicles nowadays. But I was always aware of that, but I never hated that. See, there's different types of mindset. There's the people that listeners may understand and go, hey, they see something, they see a rich dude or a nice car and they go, oh, it must be nice, or look at that rich jackass. They have that negative reaction to money or wealth or desire. And I was never like that. And a testament to my parents, they were never like that either. My parents would see someone with a nice car, and my dad would point out like, if you work really hard someday, maybe you'll be able to afford that. He would always encourage that. And so I never had that ounce of like hating people for having more than me. I would always ask questions. If I had rich friends, I would ask their parents what they did. I was the guy would always ask questions like, what do you do for a living? So that's the kind of thing that I think about. It's do you desire it? Do you genuinely want that? Or do you like hate other people because they have it? You don't.
100%. I think that's a huge component of it too. Growing up as well, I was always kind of curious about how they actually obtain, that kind of lifestyle. It was never just, like me hating on them or anything like that. It was more of kind of just realizing the lifestyle that, people can obtain and just wondering how can I actually pursue that myself. And my dad's actually an immigrant from Iran, right? So he came here with one suitcase in his hand, and, he built his life where he has 3 kids living in Upper Saddle River, New Jersey, being around these types of individuals. So, just seeing his kind of work ethic just really showed me, didn't really tell me. He told me, you want certain things in life to go get it. But he actually showed me like, this is what it takes to actually obtain, the results that you want in life. I think I didn't appreciate that at first because I was kind of more like I want to fit in and like whatnot. I never hated on people, but like I always kind of was just like, okay, how can I get it? Right. And I would get frustrated with myself. What can I do more to obtain it? But I think that the appreciation of developing into trying to figure out the solutions of how to obtain it is more valuable than just being given it to you. Right.
Absolutely, man. I would even, going back to that era, I had to build my first car. I bought a 1969 Camaro, which is cool. Like now, even I still have one of those, but it was a rusted out shit box for $1,400 that I paid for by working at McDonald's and mowing yards. And it was so rusty that you could reach into the trunk without even opening the trunk lid. I mean, it was that bad. So I bought that when I was just turning 15, and my dad and I restored that car, and I was doing most of the work. I was the laboring, right? I was the kid. So I was out there sanding on the car every day after football practice, restoring. We rebuilt the engine, we redid the interior. And by the time I turned 16, it was ready to drive. And it had one of those $99 Mako type paint jobs on it. It looked good from 10 feet away, and I had a lot of pride in it. But I also took really good care of that car, because all the hours that I put in to make it look like it was from the beginning to the end and restoring it, all my friends with the brand new Mustangs and Camaros were always tearing up their shit and like burning up clutches and wearing out tires or crashing their cars. And they would try to encourage me to drive and behave like them, but I would always respect the vehicle, and they could never understand why. It's because I was out there standing in the sun here in Houston. It gets hot in the summer, sanding on cars for 3 or 4 hours every night, working on that thing. So I respect it. And I also understand, like, that kind of goes back to the house thing. We grew up in the crappiest house, and they end up being the nicest house. I always learned to respect what we have, even when we didn't have a lot. And so I agree with you, man. I think that if you work something really hard for it and you get it, you definitely cherish it a lot more than someone that just handed to them.
100%. There's more sentimental value because you understood what it took to actually obtain it. But, just even the fact that, you took the time, you invested the time to go ahead and build out the car yourself. I think that's another thing that the second point that I wanted to touch on was the discipline that it took to actually go ahead and invest that kind of time to be able to put the car together. And I'm not too sure if you kind of were getting, insights from, mechanics or, researching to how to actually do it, but the discipline on trying to figure it out. Okay. And do you think that it had an influence with your dad being part of the military, that brought the discipline that you have today?
I had two very disciplinarian parents in different regards. I mean, we all hear the stereotype of Asian parents like really pushing you, and you're Iranian, you understand this. You got the same kind of parenting where they're very strict on education. My mom, being a woman from Japan of that era, baby boomer generation, they valued education because they didn't get that. See, most women of that era got plucked out of the school system after junior high level, what we consider, to go work in the farms and go work in the factories. So that was what happened to her. So she valued education because she couldn't have that. My dad, being a military sergeant combat vet, had all the yes, sir, no, sir, be here on time, like all the other disciplinarian things you can imagine with that. So two very disciplinarian parents where, man, I made straight A's all the way through school. School was easy for me. I mean, I studied really hard, but to me,
at least you can say that. I can't say that.
Dude, to me, like, I got my first C in college and I thought my life was over. That's the kind of perspective. And give you guys this is a good illustration on how strict my mom was with education. From kindergarten through graduation, I did not miss a single day of school.
That's a long time.
Like you're getting your ass on that bus. I don't care if you feel bad. Like, you're not staying home. So I have a high level of discipline, and that's carried into my adulthood.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, that's critical. I think at that age, like through adolescence, I mean, self-esteem is built the first 7 years of life. So when you're building that discipline at that time, I think is huge on how your future is going to, turn out. When it comes down to the military portion, though, the reason why I was asking if that really played a part in how you're operating today, because, if you really look at it, a lot of major high performance individuals and successful individuals do come from either a military background or have parents that were in a military background. And I think the huge component of what influences their success is that, with the military, it teaches you to be punctual on time and, more be early than, really just on time. Right. And I think that kind of prepares you to ultimately be prepared for any opportunity that comes about, right? Because success, happens when preparation meets opportunity. And I think that preparation of strengthening your discipline and your mindset is a huge component of any obstacle being thrown at you is ultimately going to be, persevered through, right? So I want to understand your perspective if that's ultimately what happened, if that was influenced on you through your dad.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, definitely in my late teens, early 20s, when you're in that partying type mode, that's when you start to really see the military discipline get enforced, where you may roll in at 3 a.m. after drinking and wanting to sleep in. And you're not going to sleep in the Whatley household. Like, you're getting up at 6:30 in the morning, even if you got home at 6 a.m. Like, he's not going to let you sleep in because he's going to find things for you to do, like go mow the yard, go wash the cars. Like parents like that are just always going to find something. And it's almost like they did that on purpose because I knew you stayed out late, right? It would be different if you're working and you were night shift and doing something constructive, but just coming home after, screwing off, like they just didn't tolerate it. And sometimes I'll just jump in my car and I'd go to a nearby park and I would just sleep in my car. It's like, I'm not going to, like, I always fought
Did you ever
against
get caught?
authority.
Did
No,
did
dude,
caught
I would just get out of there. I mean, it's just, I've always questioned authority, but I've always respected chain of command. I did very well in corporate. I made it to middle management at Fortune 100 companies, working for big oil companies, making multiple six-figure salaries. So I've done exceptionally well in entrepreneurship and corporate, but I understand to do it in the corporate game, you got to play the game. You got to play by the rules. You got to understand chain of command. You got to be respectful. You got to do your job. I mean, all these things are performance-based metrics, right? But the military thing for me, the timing definitely, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, that kind of statement. Just respect, and that's the other thing is about the Japanese culture. It's always based on loyalty and respect. I mean, we see like these karate movies and stuff like you dishonored the family. And like, it's big, like honor and respect are huge in the Japanese culture. So, I grew up very respectful of everybody and, just understanding that, hey, I can still learn from people I dislike if I just push my ego aside and learn to separate my emotion from my reaction. Right. So there's a lot of things I learned in that and martial arts as a kid. And it's all about just understanding what are your reactions versus the, responses, two different things. Most people react because it's an emotional reaction. Like, I don't road rage. I don't get mad. And, unless you're like trying to kill me, like you're going to see me a pretty calm state, pretty level-headed mind. I'm pretty good under fire, high operations and, high risks. I've always been a daredevil type personality. I'm just kind of like this ice cold, executioner of doing things without looking like all fearful and like frantic and losing my composure. And, I'm the kid that would get into fights and I wouldn't look angry. Right. And so that's the things I learned from both parents and just understanding like, hey, don't start the fight, but don't be afraid to finish it. And that also goes for competitiveness in business or in life. Like, you've got to compete. Nobody's going to hand you the trophy. Unfortunately, like most people like nowadays believe that you get a trophy for participating. And I know that, the younger generations hate hearing that, but it really is a difference between the baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials. Like, it has differently changed. There's been some shifts.
We're softening the generations. We're softening the generations.
Don't hurt feelings. Like back then, like hurting feelings was like normal. Like you expected to get your feelings hurt if you were allowed to, put your feelings out there.
100%. Well, there's two components that I think are critical that you're talking about right now. One is ego, and two is ultimately self-control, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that in order to have self-control, you do need to put the ego aside, because the only reason why people react to situations and whatnot is because their ego thinks that they're too good to be in that kind of circumstance, right? So ultimately taking the ego aside and being a sponge, no matter who it is that you're speaking to, being kind of what Nick Santanastasa talks about, a student of the game, right? You can learn from anybody. I think that's a huge component that ultimately allows you to observe and be aware so you know how to maneuver rather than go ahead and assume and then just try to take charge through ego, right? So moving into the business portion of everything now. So now you're helping entrepreneurs really, start to build businesses, not only build businesses, but go ahead and scale them to eventually sell them. I want to understand your process, right? You know, to understand really where you start with these entrepreneurs and how you assist them in going ahead to get to a point to scaling from, let's say, for example, you know, they're making $100,000 a year, right? All the way to, you know, scaling to 1 million, right? What's the break points? Because I know, you know, you come from the 10X scene, you know who Brandon Dawson is. He talks about breakpoint 1, breakpoint 2, breakpoint 3. He was on the podcast as well talking about that. So I kind of want to understand your process of how you take your clients from point A to Z.
I want to share some context here on goals versus decades of our life, right? I'll be 50 this year for context. I think in every decade of your life, we have these milestone birthdays, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. So every time we hit one of those milestones, it kind of creates a little internal thoughts and internal reflections, or maybe what could I have done better? What can I do going forward, right? And even then, younger listeners, especially, a lot of times people are asking, you know, like, what do you want to do with your life? And, you know, what's the meaning of life? And what's your purpose? Like all these big questions. And I want the younger listeners, especially if you're in your 20s or your 30s, to understand that you're not going to have those answers right now. And people shouldn't expect you to have those answers right now, because looking back, if I were to say, like, you don't have your shit together, you're like, you should have it all figured out by then, like, I would be the biggest hypocrite in the world. And you'll find a lot of adults are also very hypocritical because they didn't figure that stuff out till they're 40, 50, 60. So the context of my goals in my life were different for each decade. And to give you a quick version of that, maybe in your teens, you're just trying to be socially fit in. You're trying to get the cute girlfriend, or, you know, just trying to fit in, right? In your 20s, it's about, hey, I need to focus on my education or my skill set to try to figure out how to ways to make a living. Like I'm trying to establish myself. I want more responsibility, more authority. I'm trying to grow into kind of a leadership thing. And when you get to the 30s, you have that experience. Now you have that education. Now you've learned that what you're good at and what you enjoy. Now it's about stacking money for most men. I'm just speaking for men because I can't speak as a woman, but it's about, hey, I'm going to go stack money in my 30s. I'm going to go just do whatever it takes, and I'm going to be rich. Like I'm focused on the financials. 40s, when you start looking back on that and go, man, I missed a lot of my kids' baseball games. I could have spent a little bit more time with my wife. I could have gone on vacation more. Why was I working so hard? I mean, I enjoy what's in my bank account and what I've created, but was it all worth it? And you start to have a lot of doubts. And then 40s, when you start to really think about what your legacy is. Like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Is this something I truly enjoy? Have I been going down the right path? And so I can't wait to what I learned in my 50s. But I say this because I want to understand that when I was pursuing millions of dollars and selling companies and making millions of dollars, I had a different goal in mind at that era of my life versus what I do now. And I'll tell you that people ask me, what is the financial income level that seemed to be really comfortable to me? And I look back at that, the answered question is like, when I started making around 300,000 a year, I think that was a very comfortable place in life. I think that was where I had a pretty good lifestyle. I had nice cars, nice house, like all these things around that income. And then everything beyond that income was just an increase in lifestyle. It wasn't really an increase in happiness. It wasn't really an increase in, you know, feeling better about myself. Like all these things that you think are going to come with extra money. Sometimes it just comes with more time working, more problems dealing with employees, or bigger problems to deal with, you know, at the company. So I want to put that perspective with the listeners. Understand, like, you may have the goals of making multi-millions. And I love that. Go chase that. Okay. But I always want to think about my clients and the people that I coach was like, what is your end game? Like, what do you want to achieve? Like, do you just want financial freedom, or do you want to have time freedom? Because you'll find a lot of times business owners don't understand that there's a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
I'm big on time freedom now, where I used to be worried about financial freedom. So I understand a lot of times, I mean, well, you and I know this, like most small business owners build themselves jobs. They don't build companies. They build themselves a job, and they start talking about revenue goals. All I start asking them is like, okay, what are your hours goals? Because I know that if you're making, you know, 500,000 revenue at this amount of hours invested per day, and you want to double that, are you going to double your hours? And when you're in your 20s, you might say yes. You might be like, hell yeah, I'll work double to make that. Like that might be the answer, that era of your life, but realize that it's not going to always be that way. And so you start thinking about your long-term goals. Like, what do I want to make? Like, if I can make passive 300,000 and not have to work, 0-hour work week, like that'd be ideal. Like that's great. If you can make more and actually reduce. So I teach people to how they can make more over time. Because I know there's always that 1 to 2 to 3 year startup that you're going to have to put in some crazy hours. Like you're going to have to hustle. Like you can't skip that part. And anybody tells you otherwise, don't take their advice. So that 1 to 3 years, be prepared to do some work, outwork the rest of the competition. But if you can find that on the backside of that, we're creating a long-time legacy where you actually can make more money and work fewer hours. That's what I want. Some other people, they want crazy hours like all the time. Like there's different cultures and thoughts that you can learn from different people. Like if you want to go work 18 hours a day until you die, then good for you. Like that's your choice. And I'm not going to say that's good or bad, but some people love to do that. I'm not that person.
All right, Tony, I'm gonna take it a little controversial on you right now, just because there's a lot of things that you're saying that I think that aligns with what, where I'm about to lead this. Okay, so first of all, the decade portion that you were talking about, in your 20s, you're kind of trying to fit in and whatnot. Then all of a sudden it gets to money, etc. I think that is basically how the system is structured, right? It's meant for us to kind of look at it in that way. And this is why I think that we really need to change our school systems, because at the end of the day, what we need to start focusing on is, even just the money, portion of it. When you're building a company, instead of looking at how much money you're going to make, start chasing the being a person of value rather than the money, right? That all comes from our perspective from when we're young. First, it starts with the social circle, and then we see what other people have. And then when we can't get the girl, we're just like, oh, I'm going to get all this money. And then they're going to want me, right? So it kind of goes from stage to stage. And then all of a sudden you get to a certain financial point and you're just like, well, damn, now I don't have any time, for myself or the things that I want to do. And I think that it's critical that we start changing the system of how we're brought up as, individuals, as men, especially men. I think this is a huge component because we're supposed to be the provider. That's basically tradition, how things have gone down in history. But at the end of the day, I think that if we can kind of remove the way that we engage with each other in that kind of, I would say maybe from 15 to 25 age range, where we're kind of competing against each other to see who gets a better girl or who's more, liked and things like that. If we could remove that and we just start emphasizing on what it means to figure out who you are, what you want, why you want it, ultimately we can go ahead and start, changing the trajectory of how men are going to be, prepared for their future. Because I think that if we can go ahead and get them to start thinking about it, at, let's say, for example, 15, what is it that I want to create? Why do I want to create it? Then we can go ahead and start building that foundation. So by their 20s, they have the energy to go out there for 2-3 years and really just, hustle their ass off, put a foundation in place, go ahead and not create a job, but, ultimately, a cash flow machine to set them up so that they can have the time freedom to go ahead and provide more value to each individual that they're engaging with for the rest of their life. Right. So I think it really starts from really just the way that high school and the school system is brought, into society today.
Yeah, I'd agree. I have nothing to disagree with you on that. Now, I would add to that is I would say that when I was young, and I'm probably most of the listeners' parents' age, kind of just perspective wise, right? When I was young, information was not accessible. We didn't carry cell phone devices in our pockets that we could just Google something and ask Siri and have the answer within seconds. We didn't have that. So the Generation X and older people highly valued education and information because it wasn't readily available. I mean, unless you're going to sit at the kitchen table and thumb through an encyclopedia, that's how you're going to learn a lot of stuff, or have to go to the library and check out a book. I mean, it was kind of a pain in the ass factor, right? So we valued the college education, and they would tell you like, hey, you're going to go be a digging ditches or hanging on the back of a trash truck if you don't go to school. So we had that instilled, like, you got to go to school or you're going to be a failure. That was my era, right? We find that a lot of times people do pursue that degree plan and they get out and they don't even use the right degree for the career that they're working, or they work some career that didn't even require the degree in the first place. So they are saddled with the student debt, that kind of the topic that people talk about nowadays. And so it's different now. So understand this, especially young listeners, like your parents are going to give you the advice based on the era they grew up in. They're not being progressive and looking at what today is existing, right? They're not understanding things that changed.
In the past.
Yeah. So to me, like, college nowadays is a waste of money. And I have an engineering degree. To me, it's a waste of money unless you want to go be a surgeon, you want to go be an engineer, and you have to have that degree. Like if the career path that you just have to work is required to have that very specific degree, go get it. Go get it. That's what you need to do. But all the other stuff, it could be a hobby. You can learn all that same information, probably at a higher level from people who have executed and operated and done some amazing things in any field of study that you want to learn. You can go buy their books. You can go join their course. You can go apprentice for them and work for free and learn from the master versus paying some university, learning from people who have never succeeded in anything that they're teaching. So
I love that.
Go mentor, go apprentice, go find the people with the information and put yourself in their proximity and pay them or work for them for free, volunteer for them. You're going to learn a lot more than you're going to learn from an engineering school or background or business school. Like anybody going to school for business, like, oh my gosh, like
don't do it. It's a waste of money.
Come on, guys.
I honestly love that you're saying this because I was talking to somebody about this not too long ago. We were talking about like, okay, if you want to go to school, if you're going to school, make sure that your career choice is going to be completely specialized. That it's required that you have to have certain information. Otherwise, take that money that you're going to invest and go, find somebody, that let's say for example, the business school portion, right? You're going to get an MBA, for example, and you're learning from somebody who's making $40,000 a year without even their own business, expecting to build $1 million business. It's not going to work, right? Instead, take that money that you're going to invest into the school and go ahead and pay somebody. Just for them to let you observe them and their lifestyle. Because I think that the problem is, especially with school systems, we're not exposed to the different kinds of role models and what, lifestyles there actually are out there. Because it's easy for anybody to say, hey, you know what? I want to make $1 billion. Okay. But do you want the process that actually goes with actually making $1 billion, right? You have to get as close to that individual, whether it's a personal relationship, observing them from the far, consuming all their content like you were saying beforehand, and understand what their day-to-day lifestyle is and seeing, okay, can I actually take that on myself and would I be fulfilled, living that kind of discipline on a daily basis to actually obtain that? Because, people might say, yeah, and then all of a sudden they start doing it, and then guess what? It's not what they expected because they're just like, I don't, I want to be able to go hang out with my friends or, see, my family. People don't understand what it takes. I think that's the biggest reason why a lot of people get stagnant, they get depressed because they pursue something, but they don't really realize what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah. And the MBA thing's a sore subject for me too. I ran into that in my corporate experience. Okay. So I was working right under vice president level. I was on the executive path, and the last 3 companies I'd worked for, they offered to pay for it. They wanted me to go get the MBA. And, it's like this checkbox you got to have to get into the executive path. You got to go get your MBA. And I would always question them, said, have you ever started a business? Well, no. I was like, well, you have an MBA. Like, haven't you ever started a business? Have you ever made millions of dollars? Have you ever, done anything to make your own decisions outside of a brand name that you work for? No. I was like, well, why do you think that MBA is so valuable? I said, I have an MBA. I tell them, I said, it's called Making Business Actual.
Ooh, I like that.
And they would look at it and they're like, oh, I was like, I guarantee if I were to go start up a business against any of your professors that you had in your MBA program, I would run circles around them because they've never applied it. They've only theorized or thought about it, read it from a book. Don't think that you need the MBA, guys. Like it used to be cool 15, 20 years ago when there was so few of them, but then the market became flooded with them and everybody started making these online MBAs and executive MBAs. It's almost like a way to feed the university system cash versus really doing it because you need it.
You want to hear something funny? If you're going to go to school, I would actually find out who owns the school and go get mentored by them, because at the end of the day, school and college is a business, right? You want to learn how to make $1 billion business? Go find out who's the owner of the school and see if you can be mentored by them rather than one of their professors.
Yeah. Go be their executive assistant for 1 year and you'll probably learn more than you ever learned in school.
100%. So, I'm 100% on the same page, about the whole school system and, how it applies to, business and most people not perceiving what it really takes to actually get to where they want to be. But talk to me about, your process once again, though, because I think that's a huge component. Being able to help people realize what it takes to start a business, get it to where it's sustainable, and then really take it to the next level. So, where it's sustainable, you're probably still working in the business, right? You're in phase one. In order to go from point zero to phase one, and then from phase one to phase two, where you're working on the business rather than in the business, and you have more time freedom.
Yeah, I think it starts with looking at the ideas that you have for businesses. I think that a lot of times we have a lot of ideas. We give ourselves too much credit for ideas. And when you go past any graveyard, you realize that there's millions of ideas buried in that grave that never became reality. So don't ever give yourself too much credit for just having a cool product or idea or a business idea, because everybody has those. Like you go have a conversation at the water cooler with your coworkers. Everybody's got an idea for business or 10 ideas. So how do you take those ideas to find the one that's going to give you the right potential? You have to be really honest with yourself. Like, what is the earning level that you would like to achieve per year, per month, per week? What is the outcome? Are you building this thing to scale and maybe pass on to your great grandkids that don't even exist? Or are you trying to build something that you're going to sell in 5 to 7 years? Like, there's different objectives that you have to set for yourself. And maybe the time freedom. Is it something that you want to show up at a storefront from 8 to 5 and have business hours posted on the front? Or would you rather travel the world and be able to open up your laptop and operate this business from anywhere at any time? So there's different types of things and different business models that you have to understand what's right for you. And there's no right answer because everybody has a different answer. But then when you start to look at what your goals are, and you look at the ideas that you have on your list of the things that you want to do, you have to start crossing out the things, even if they sound like a great idea and I can make money. Like, that's not the objective. What is it that's going to give you the best potential to get to the goals that you personally want to achieve financially, time freedom, location freedom? When you start to understand that these things have definitely a clear path that I can get to that goal, those are the ones you should go all in on. You should just disregard, because I think a lot of times people hold on to these novelty ideas or business ideas that, like ego or pride. They just think it's a good idea. It may be a great idea. It may be the best product ever, but it might be for somebody else to go do because it doesn't fit what your personal goals are, right? And I see a lot of times people, a good example, like apparel. I can't tell you how many times people come to me like, hey, I want to start a t-shirt company. I want to start an apparel company. And I was like, okay, cool. Do you have an audience? No. It's like, well, who's going to buy your apparel? Like, are you just going to run a bunch of Facebook ads and hope that money comes in? Like, because all these e-com guys are convince you that this is the easiest way to make money? Like, no, like you got to understand that there's processes to get to the goal. Like if I'm selling a t-shirt and I make $4 a shirt, like I got to sell a lot of shirts to make a substantial amount of cash, right? Simple math. Where if I'm going to go sell something expensive, like one of my companies, I sell high-end forged wheels for cars. Average price is about $6,000 a set. And if I make 40 points or 25 points based on my distributor level, that's a pretty big payday for just one email. How many t-shirts would I have to sell to make $1,000? I can do that with one email with what I sell, right? So thinking about goals and time commitment, and does it require a lot of team? Does it require a lot of infrastructure? Is it going to require a lot of apps and systems, like all these overhead costs? You got to plan this kind of stuff. So it all starts with the beginning. And I think that most people, unfortunately, get clouded by money and they get into doing something. They're opposite of what you said. They are not focused on becoming a person of value. I like that you said that earlier, because that's a key. Like, please go rewind and listen to Mike say that, because that's the key for success, is becoming the person or the entity of value. And if you look at anybody that you and I both know that are high net worth, that have made the millions of dollars, it's not because they were so focused on themselves. It was because they were so focused and relentless about helping as many people as possible achieve what they wanted to achieve. And then the results always come back and pay you in dividends. Even like the LS1 Tech automotive community, 300,000 members. We had 150 advertising accounts. I helped hundreds of different companies make millions of dollars. Therefore, I created a value entity for them to make a lot of money, built a lot of 7- and 8-figure companies from my little brand, right? So therefore, I'm going to get the reward for that. It wasn't about me being at the top of the heap of the pyramid and standing up there going, it's all about me and I'm super awesome and I built this thing. It's like, no, dude, I was focused on helping them, building relationships with them on an individual level. When there was conventions in different parts of the country, I would fly out there, shake their hand, get to know them on a personal level.
That way it made a whole lot easier for them to write that check every month to pay advertising to be on my website that they were making money from. So you got to be this value person, value entity, think bigger than yourself. I think a lot of times people get clouded by the influencer space. You know, we all hang out on Instagram and TikTok and, oh, they got 1 million followers. Like, dude, that, you know, a lot of them are fake, like fake followers paying fake dollars. Like, I don't care how many followers you have. I'd rather have 1,000 real followers than 100,000 fake followers.
100%.
Because I understand that people in the influencer space want to position as like, it's all about them. They just want the likes. They want to be Kim Kardashian, who's not creating value for anybody. She just at the top
keeping
of the heap
up with the Joneses.
You know, she's a good entertainer. She's a great entertainer. She's exceptional at branding. Like, you can learn a lot of different things from them, but it's all about her, right? It's all about her. And most people think that they can get rich doing that, but it's not the case. Like most vast majority of people get rich from helping other people become successful in something.
100%. And also just for everybody to know, a lot of the influencers out there that have, you know, 1 million followers, 2 million followers, go find out what kind of car they drive real quick. Yeah, I'm not joking. They don't make that much money. Most people don't. There
was that case like that girl came out maybe a year ago that went viral. Like, she tried to create a T-shirt brand. There's that apparel brand with her 1 million followers, and someone said like she sold like 20 T-shirts.
Jesus. See, people don't. They only see the external rather than what's really going on the back end, right? But hold on, I want to take it back, step back to the value portion. I'm gonna throw a little twist on you. Okay, I want to get your perspective.
I like it. Let's hear it.
So let's say, for example, you have somebody who is focused on being a person of value, going out there trying to, you know, help others. That's the bigger vision for them, right? They get started in a business, and, you know, at the end of the day, in order to be a person of value, you need to be able to do it for yourself first before you can do it for anybody else. It all starts with you, but then it's bigger than you, right? So in order to be able to provide value to somebody else, you have to be secure yourself. So let's say, for example, somebody gets into this journey, because I've seen this a lot with my clients too, right? They get into the journey, and all of a sudden they maybe didn't project the numbers right of what the overhead's really going to be. Or, you know, things go wrong within the business over the let's say, for example, the first year. And then all of a sudden, you know, they start getting into a position where they're kind of crammed, right? And all of a sudden they have to, you know, go ahead and start focusing back on them rather than, you know, being a person of value. And then it can kind of consume the business and bring that down. I think that's what happens to a lot of businesses. They kind of, you know, have this great idea of how to help people. They start it, and then all of a sudden, you know, they get into a financial bind, and then they have to kind of backtrack or either shut down and whatnot. So for that person, let's say, for example, somebody that's viewing that, ultimately, you know, is at that point where they're either breaking even or, you know, not, you know, they're falling under, you know, their bottom line. What would you say to that person?
First of all, hire a business coach. That's going to save you a lot of the detours and a lot of the roadblocks that you're going to run into that you may not even see for yourself.
You guys heard that right here. Me or Tony, you know, you can get in contact with one of us.
If not you or I, somebody, just hire someone, because that'll be one of the biggest investments you'll make, because they see the red flags that are coming before you do. And that saves you a lot of time and money. And you and I both know that most companies really starve themselves of cash. They don't understand how to do the cash flow management, and they don't know how to set aside different bank accounts that handle the cash flow and operating expenses. They don't understand that's a business thing. Most business owners, unfortunately, are very skillful or knowledgeable in some level of talent of something, but they're not business people. Okay. Because I have these people that come to me and they want to start a company, and they say, hey, I'm exceptional at this. Like, they're a skill. Maybe they're a welder. Let's give an example. Like, I'm a great welder and I want to build art and sell art like that I can weld together in my garage. Like, awesome. Cool. They don't understand marketing. They don't understand accounting. They don't understand any of that other stuff, positioning, branding. They don't understand any of that, but they're exceptional welders. So they think that their great talent or their great skill or their great knowledge is going to create great dollars. But they have to understand that whatever skill or knowledge that you're bringing to the table to start a business, to me, that's only worth about 50% of your success. So no matter how good you are at something, unless you're committed and willing to go learn the other 50% and being an exceptional business person and commit to learning from people that actually know business, you're not going to have really good odds of success.
100%. So one thing that you said, the whole marketing portion, I think that one's kind of easy, or just basically how to gain more awareness to your products and services. That's somebody can teach you strategy for that, right? It's all about understanding who your target demographic is, and how to, ultimately, utilize key verbiage in your advertising to attract them and, get them to, be more interested and retain them on either an ad or, your piece of content, et cetera, right? But I think what you just said right there, the business person, the one characteristic I think that they have to really be able to hone in on is the accounting portion too. I think that's a huge component of really being able to be sustainable and really have, conscious projections where they're legitimate, where you're not, basically wishful thinking. Right? An entrepreneur is a good person for going ahead and, creating the ideas, but you have to have that business person in there too to really understand the numbers, right? And I think that people don't really look at the numbers when they're first starting out a business, and I think that's a major reason why they fail. So I want to understand for you, when you're looking at somebody's, because I also do this with my clients, I go through the financial statements and all their overhead and try to figure out what's actually critical, what's not, because I feel like, once again, everybody likes that external validation, the persona, et cetera, and they rather go ahead and put themselves in a certain situation, just to kind of be perceived and liked, and they think that's going to get the more attention, et cetera, when in reality, maybe you get a few more likes on a post or something like that, or you get, congratulations from somebody, but they don't look at the back end of the actual numbers. And it's not going to do anything for the numbers, just like that girl with the t-shirt company and then the 20 t-shirt sales. So when you're looking at somebody's numbers and the overhead, what are the let's say, for example, you have somebody who has a consulting business, because I do work with a lot of consultants too, consulting firms. What are the key operating expenses that you think are critical, and what are the three biggest mistake expenses that you see your clients make?
Man, it varies by industry. There's no flat answer to that, but I would say that I tend to see marketing budget not big enough for a lot of companies. And unless you're some kind of social media person with a big audience that you can do organic and grow like that, or you're friends with people that will do shout outs, or just something that you're not spending money, I would say that you got to have a pretty big budget for marketing. I mean, it's kind of funny because you and I both know, like, the ClickFunnels guys and things like that. They have their trophies on the walls and stuff, and those are all based in revenue, but nobody ever really talks about what the overhead cost and what their ROI is on those. If I go sell $1 million, I know that I hate to say it, but I know people that have spent nearly $1 million in their own things to get that ClickFunnel trophy. Like, it's easy to show that you sold $1 million if you only profited $1, right? You just got to keep pushing the money back through your system. So understand that. Don't get really distracted by the revenue figures that people like to toss out and tell you like they're 7-figure, 8-figure. This, like, at the end of the day, it's profits what really matters. Profit margin's even more important to me. So marketing is a big budget that most people tend to skip. They just think that I'll create this internet website thing and people will find it on Google and they'll just show up and money will just wake up. I'll wake up with money in my account. Like, they have this simplified version of things because they hear this from the wrong people. The next one I would say is leadership, understanding that if you're not wanting to work, if your goal is to work fewer hours, you got to start conditioning the succession plan and having the right people come in. And good people are not cheap. Okay. And I see this mistake even in corporate level. When you have like a star performer, I'd say most people are average workers. Let's be real. Like, they're average, right? The below average ones kind of fire themselves. They kind of weed themselves out. But the ones that are exceptional, the ones that that are, if I lost that individual and I had to replace them, like, it would cost me a lot of time and a lot of energy to go find someone. I'll probably go through 5 other people before I found one that could match this. Like, you should pay those people. You should pay those people far more than what market rate is. Because I think a lot of HR professionals, like, oh, a project manager, at this level, they make 150,000 a year. It's like, okay, cool. We'll give them 155.
You know what I do to kind of verify with people to see if they're actually quality or whatnot? I give every single person, I don't care if they're sales or, in marketing, because I have everything in-house and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I give them a 3-month performance review. I start them at a lower salary. I start them at a lower salary, and based off their results, I go ahead and, increase their salary and whatnot. And then I do another 3 months because the first 3 months, it's easy to
It's
show.
honeymoon phase, man.
Exactly.
Dude, I love that. I love that because here's the thing. It's like a big question. Like one of my clients will come to me and go, hey, we're hired. Like one of them's looking for a general manager. And it's a 8-figure company. That's a pretty big salary. They're 200,000 type range salary. And they come to the conversation thinking like, oh man, it's a $200,000 risk. It's going to be a lot of expense. And I always catch them right there. And I said, hey, Mike, it's not a $200,000 risk. Like, what do you mean? That's the offer we're going to make. It's like, no, 3 months of that salary is the real risk because you can fire them if they suck, return them back to the job market. I mean, so really your risk is actually how long they perform. So a $200,000 salary sounds like a lot of money, but if they really are terrible at it, you're going to find out probably in the first month. So your real risk is 1 month of salary. And when you start reframing it like that, like, oh, well, that's not really a big risk at all because you're damn right. Because if they are good, they're going to net a return. They're going to amplify whatever you're investing in them in some capacity. It's going to show up on the bottom line. They should be adding to your bottom line versus costing you at the top line.
100%. And you know what I think another big component about the performance reviews are? So like, let's say, for example, I put out an ad for, a position, right? So I'll start them at the lower ad, the lower number, right? Let's say, for example, $50,000, right? If I give them the $50,000 salary for 3 months, ultimately, if you're willing to go through that journey, and I put this in the offer letters, like you'll have a 3 month, a 6 month, a 9 month, and a 12 month performance review. I want to see how long you can go. If you can go 12 months, you earn that salary that we're going to give you at the end of the 12 months. But I think that what that does is, first of all, it really shows the character of the kind of individuals that you're bringing into the environment, which does help with the culture, especially with a leader that is willing to go out there and work with his people and lead by example. I think that the people who are willing to work those stages throughout 12 months are going to stay with you far way longer than somebody who's just like, no, I want $200,000 off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take it back to the accounting thing that you were talking about.
Yeah, I apologize. I went off topic.
No, that was great. There's definitely some good fire in there. I just think the accounting thing, most people, I want to give you guys a high level understanding of risk versus money. Okay. There's different ways to get paid in a business structure. You have your cash flow positive, neutral, and negative. Most people don't understand that there's actually 3 different ways of doing that. So let me give you some examples of what those 3 different types of business models are. So a cash flow positive is when you're getting paid before the products or services are rendered. So you're getting paid in advance. And most people are like, well, why would people pay in advance? Well, coaching, we get paid before we offer any coaching. If you go buy a concert ticket, you're buying the concert ticket months, maybe even a year before the concert even occurs. So your cash flow positive business model, like what can you sell where the customer is funding all of the overhead costs? Like you're actually buying the products with their money and just keeping your portion at the top, right? So that's cash flow positive. That's what I tend to focus on. I love the cash flow positive business model because there's low risk. There's no chance of them like not getting the product or service and not paying you, right? It's really low risk. Cash flow net neutral is when you have milestone payments. It's like building a house. Like you do a draw. Hey, we did the framing and we want 20%. Okay, we did the roof. We need another 5%. And so you're making these milestone payments. That's actually shared risk. That's low risk for both buyer and seller. Not a bad place to be. Okay, because if someone runs out of money, then you got paid up to the job that you completed or the products that you sent. Now, cash flow negatives, where most people tend to fall in the trap because they don't understand. You got to be really good at understanding accounting and cash flow management if you're cash flow negative. That means you're doing the product or selling the product or the service already done before you get paid. And especially if it's like net 30 or net 60 and you're getting paid 30 days later, like that's a higher risk because that client or that customer may have cash at the point of the completion of the project, but 30 days later, they may be bankrupt or they may have run out of cash and they can't pay you. And now you're taking all the risk. So when you're thinking of your business models, be really focused on those phases of payment. Go, hey, is this a cash flow positive, a neutral, or a negative? And try to lean positive if you can.
100%. I think that's honestly even big in the consulting industry as well. Like you could have people on monthly payments. So, as you're going, or you can have them pay up front. I would never go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to do this for you first and then, pay me later on. At that point, because people, you can't even trust people these days.
Nope.
It's hard to, evaluate somebody on basically one or two engagements. And if, a lot of people, I hear this objection all the time when I'm talking to the clients and whatnot, or prospects. There's like, well, how do I know if I'm going to get the result? First of all, I never guarantee results. I guarantee you, if you do the work that I promise you, you will get a result. But I don't know. You can make the commitment and, all of a sudden just not be doing the work. And then, you're going to come back and tell me that, I didn't get a result. But at the end of the day, they say, okay, I want you to prove it to me. I want you to work with me, get me the result, and then I'll pay you more. Or they'll say, you know what, help me get my first deal and I'll give you, a portion of this. And I say, no, at the end of the day, you know why? Because at the end of the day, if I do this for you, you'll never know what it takes when you're speaking to the prospect to stay committed and get them to respect you, to do it upfront or monthly payments as well.
I would say that the only caveat I'd have to that is if you're getting started and you don't have the testimonials or the test cases that you can share that have proven that, you may have to take some of the free gigs. I would actually talk to people that's like, what would you do for free to build up a list of testimonials of results? So are you willing to do that? A lot of people have the ego and like, oh, I wouldn't work for free. It's like, dude, I did that for a year and a half where I built 12 different people, 6-figure companies, because I have income, I have other businesses, but I was coaching them and I was just making sure that I had the processes down. And it's like, I'm not going to charge them a cent. And that gave me 12 cases of cheerleaders essentially are like, dude, shit works. Like, it all worked. And I was expecting maybe 80% of them to make it through that, but it was 100%. So I realized like, okay, this is pretty good. It's repeatable. It gives me more confidence. And then your rates start to increase. And when you get to the position of consulting or coaching where you can turn down business, that's the word. That's ultimately where you want to be. But you have to earn that. You can't just come in and be like, I'm super awesome. And like, I'm just going to say no to everybody that doesn't meet my criteria. So go get your cash flow, go build the business, but then get to the point where you can earn that privilege of turning away business.
Spot on. And I think that's, for example, before I started my company, there was a portion of time that I was just, saying, hey, you know what, I want to work with you, but I didn't have a business at that point. I want to work with you and try to help you get to a certain place, right? So I was able to kind of experiment at that point to make sure that it all worked. And then once I actually started the company, I didn't do any free stuff. The only free stuff I did was, okay, maybe I'll give you a book or a PDF or, free webinar or something like that. But at that point, I built the confidence where I know that, what I'm providing is value and that you're going to get a result off of it. So I'm not bending because at the end of the day, I can't teach you to get to that point where you're not going to bend either. It's built in ethics.
Yeah. And I agree with you on the other statement of like, you can't guarantee results because everybody's different. Sometimes we can pour a little bit into somebody and they just go amplify the hell out of it and get some crazy result, like even bigger than we thought was possible. And then some people you give all the attention you can and they just don't even move the rock.
100%. So Tony, honestly, let's say, for example, somebody wants to get insight on, your services and want to work with you to be able to bring their business to, a point where there's 6, 7, 8-figure earners. Where can they go ahead and find you? And ultimately, is there anything that they can go out there, for example, the book, or do you have any PDFs or something that people can go ahead and get introduced to your insights and your content before they even, express interest into your services and whatnot?
Yeah, I would say start with the book or the podcast. The book's called Side Hustle Millionaire. You can find it on Amazon. Sold thousands of copies. It came out in 2018. It's really how to take your ideas and really build that first 7-figure business. So it kind of holds you through the process. For a $14 investment, I think that's the easiest way to kind of get all the information in one place. Now, the podcast, I'm 250 episodes deep. It's been out a few years, top show like yourself. And yeah, you could definitely go listen to 250 hours of content, but it's going to take you a long time.
You're way ahead of me right now. I'm on like 30.
Yeah. So it starts that way, dude, but it'll be 100, then 200, and it keeps stacking and you don't even know, like you can't even keep up with the episode counts at some point. But, I always think about that. Like when people want to come to you, like some people just come out, hey man, can you mentor me? Like you get that, I get that, but have you actually consumed the affordable or the free content first? I mean, I have 250 hours of content. Did you consume that first before approaching me to be a mentor of you? I mean, it's like, come on, man. Like, did you read the book? No, I'm thinking about reading. It's like, guys, if I wanted to go be mentored by something, like my mentors are Ed Milet and Andy Frisella. Like I paid $70,000 to join their mastermind. go hang out with them, become good friends with them, shoot questions back and forth. We still kind of collaborate. Ed's going to be on my show Monday. So it's understand that you got to be in the proximity, and sometimes that costs money. And don't be afraid of that, because if you want to advance and accelerate your results, you got to be in the proximity of the people that can make that happen for you. And you got to sometimes reach into your wallet to create that. But you know what? That's the shortcut to life. And if you understand that, you can do as much as you can for free, but it only gets you so far, right?
100%.
So I'm not saying that to go hire myself or Mike or pitch. I'm saying this is how the world works. Go be around the people that have the information, the people that can pull the levers and make things happen for you, and be a person of value in those organizations too. Don't be the sponge that's just always asking questions. Like, think about how you can contribute to them, how you can showcase what they're building. How can you be the cheerleader for the brand, or just sharing the post that they make? Like, we are very aware of who our top level supporters are. We become very aware. And if your name is always popping up on the social media as a supporter and you're doing things, we recognize that you're going to get a lot more attention in that regard. So, person of value.
Well, I want to say something just on that portion. I'm telling you, every time you talk, I feel like I could just keep going with it and, point other things out. But what you just said right there too, I think that there's two questions, right, that you always got to memorize in your life, right? So for example, even if you're going to somebody to ask them to mentor you or get information and be around them, that's kind of a little bit opposite of what I'm saying. But if you're in sales or you're a business owner, entrepreneur, memorize these two questions. One, how can I help you, right? Everybody wants to, everybody is, they're humble enough to say, hey, how can I be of service to you? But everybody's ego is in the way of asking, how can you help me? That's question number two that you got to always ask.
That's tough. That's tough. That's the hard question. That's definitely the harder question of the two.
So that is something that, it takes you to put the ego aside, because the reason why people don't ask is because of their ego. But at the end of the day, if you just went to everybody and you said, first, how can I help you? And then also, how can you help me? I guarantee you they're going to put you in contact with at least one more person. If you can get one more person a day that you can get in contact with that might be a benefit to you, and vice versa, you're building a network. And the basis to building a successful business is the fundamentals of building a successful business is networking.
Absolutely. I like that question. I mean, it's and to answer the other question you had prior, 365driven.com. That's my website. It has links to everything that I do, the podcast, the books, the courses, the events. We do all kinds of live events now. We're actually going to Mexico next week for our 4th live event. So yeah, we stay involved in this kind of stuff. And I think that this has been an awesome conversation, man. I can't wait to get you on the microphone for my show too, man. I've really enjoyed this.
Honestly, I'm grateful for having you, bro. And we definitely got to plan something and meet up, and, maybe even do another episode in person. So, I'd love to, stay connected and, see where we could take our relationship too.
Awesome.
Tony, I appreciate you joining us. Everybody, go give him a follow. What's going on, guys? If you guys like that episode of the True Life Network podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, and make sure to go ahead and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Any upcoming episodes.